welcome to We Need to Name This, where we unpack the hidden curriculum of academe with scholars of color. I'm Ebony Bruce Harvey, and my host,
Laura Ann Jacobs.
And today's title is entitled, What is a Dissertation? So before we get started, we'd like to introduce you to an amazing, talented woman of color, Ashley Jackson, and she's going to share her experiences with us. So let me share a little bit about Ashley before we get started. Ashley is a fifth-year doctoral student in educational studies with a concentration in science education. Ashley's dissertation examines the interplay between place, gender, sexuality, class, and science identity formation for Black people from the American South. Ashley received her MA from the University of Michigan in Teaching and Learning and her BA in Applied Mathematics and Physics from Wesleyan College. Thank you, Ashley, for being with us today. We're really excited to start talking with you.
Asking me.
Okay, so we start out with this particular question for all our guests, and it's really just tell us what brought you to academia and how you determined your area of study.
So as you read in my bio, I got a bachelor's degree in applied mathematics with a concentration in physics. And after I left undergrad, I was like, I'm not going to work in industry. I think I want to go teach. Mm-hmm. And my advisor, who was like the only physics professor, was like, that sounds great. I think you would be really good at that. Mm-hmm. So he was like, you should go teach high school. So I was a substitute teacher, like a permanent one, at first at a magnet school for science and technology, and then at a Jewish day school in Atlanta. And I was like, there's all these things happening, and I really am like curious about them. And I don't want to teach, I want to research this. So I was like, I'm going to go to the University of Michigan. And that worked out because my spouse was going there for his PhD in applied physics. And so it was like, I'm going to go too. And like, I'm going to get this MA. And then I got the MA and was like, oh no, like I need to get a PhD. So yes, I applied for my PhD at the same institution.
And why did you decide specifically science education? So I know you did work in mathematics and physics, but why did you decide, maybe not, you taught, so you didn't choose teacher education, right? Or you didn't choose that, yeah. You chose science. So why did you choose particularly science as your focus for your PhD?
Yeah, it was really, okay, so I did not choose teacher education, which was intentional, because I was like, I don't know how to teach, so I don't have any questions about the art of teaching. I still stand by that. I'm like, I don't know. But I was really into student learning. And at first I was really into conceptual change, which is like how students, have like these preconceived notions of science and then learn, and then how they change and develop their understanding. And then I was like, that's boring, because all I want to talk about is what I was noticing when I was teaching was why like Black girls were like, I don't feel good about doing science, like physics, for example, which is what I majored in. And so my advisor at the time was like, you've always been talking about this. She had been my advisor since my master's, and she was like, you've always been talking about this. I don't know why you just don't do it. And so I was like, yeah, I need to just like go ahead and do science ed, because I was going to design my own concentration. Okay. But she was like, no, she was like, there's a place for you in science education. And the reason why I make that distinction is because my understanding of science education at the time was it was only conceptual change. Like that's all anybody wanted to talk about was how to teach for student understanding of concepts and things. But then I found like my advisor included a group of people who were really interested in cultural studies of science education, learner identity. And so I was like, okay, I'll stay here. Yeah, I'll do that.
Nice. All right, cool. So I'm glad our viewers get a taste of why you came to grad school, and if they're looking to break into like STEM fields, that it's not only about like, oh, how students learn, but it's about how they exist in the social space. And there is a space in academia for you to do that work. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to pass it off to Loriann.
Thank you. So the title of this episode is What is a Dissertation? And we have a few sections of this. And so we know that you're kind of approaching your working on your proposal and thinking about your pre-oral defense. And so those are going to be some of the parts that we're going to focus on today. So my question for you is, what is a pre-oral defense or the informal defense? Different institutions might call it something different. And whether it's the proposal defense or the preliminary exam defense, what is your process for receiving and responding to feedback at these milestones?
Yeah, so it's funny because it's like, I have a preferred process and then there's like an actual process.
Okay. Okay.
So something that I'm going to explicitly name is that, you know, your dissertation is a group project. Whether you want to accept that or not, it is you and your committee in this thing, you and your chair in this thing. And so I am somebody who, I do my best work by just like taking my time. Like my process is a lot of thinking, a lot of like chewing and toying and melding. And so when I get feedback back, I don't actually read it first thing. I let it sit because I'm like over here doing something else. That's another thing. Dissertation work is so simultaneous. Like there's so many things going on at once. There's never a time where you're like, today is feedback day only. You can carve that time, but for me, it's like when I get feedback, I table it and I say, you know, thank you. Like I'm gonna keep that right here. And then I'll say, okay, on this day for like this many hours, I'm gonna look at it. And so I'll just like do a pass through. Okay, what is everyone saying? Okay, you know, aside from what is everyone saying, now how am I gonna deal with that? And so it's a lot of, for me, it's a lot of reading and thinking. And I love arguing with myself. So I'm like, oh, why did they say that? And then I'm like, well, actually, they probably said that because you did this. And I'm like, okay, but that doesn't mean they should have said that. And it's like, okay, well, then, and so it's a lot of going back and forth. And are you also asking like, what is like the turnaround? Like, when are you giving back like drafts or things like that? Yeah, so that is something that luckily for me, I co-construct with my chair, who is also my advisor. And sometimes, you know, she's like, just take 2 weeks. And, you know, so maybe 2 weeks later, I'll turn it back in. Or there have been times where she, you know, has just been like, I don't know if I'm going to get to that until next month. So it's like, oh, okay, I have like a full month. So yeah, I know when, and I'll also say this, I know when I get difficult feedback, I ask a friend. That's something I did also want to share, is that I ask a friend to read it and I'll say, can you tell me what this means? Because I don't know what this means. And I feel like that's good for me because sometimes, you know, they don't have a stake in it. My lens is so wrapped up in like the personal, because our work is so personal, that I'm like, they hurt my feelings. Like that is me. I'm like, this comment hurts my feelings and I want to fight. And they're like, oh, no. Like they're really just saying like, can you add another sentence? And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm glad. Like crisis averted, no fighting. Like no need to get buck in the emails. So yeah.
Is there do you feel that there's a difference with like the verbal feedback and the meaning of the defense and like written feedback? Is there a way that you respond differently in those situations?
Yes. So written feedback, sometimes you don't know what people mean. You don't know the tone, you don't know the intention. But I have found in verbal feedback during like for example, my proposal defense, I felt like it was so different because everyone was really trying to make sure that I understood that I think it's great. I just don't know what this means, or I want you to tell me more about that, or, oh, I'd love to see what that looks like in practice. And so I feel like, you know, when I'm writing, I don't get that because they might just be like, I got to get this comment out and I got to send it back to you, versus a conversation. But also me too, I feel like I get a chance to respond in real time during that meeting. And so, you know, like I shared a little bit ago, I fight with myself. So if someone is like, I don't understand this, or I think you should do this, I'm like, well, let me tell you why I'm not doing that, versus me talking to a Word document. You know, we can have like a real time conversation where I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. And here's why. And then I found in my proposal defense, you know, some committee members, they were like, yeah, let's go back and forth on this. And they were enjoying it because it was like, oh, like you really like, you can talk and hold your own. And I was like, yeah, because I've beaten myself over the head 6 months trying to understand the difference between a phenomenological study versus a case study. And I know why I want to do one or the other. And that just doesn't happen in writing, I would say. You kind of feel like I gotta either do or don't do what the comment is saying. And if I don't do, I have to name that, right, when I turn this back in.
Thank you. That's an awesome reflection on feedback. I feel like sometimes we feel the pressure to get comments and you have to make every single change every single time, and can feel like you're losing some of your own agency over your own project. So it's nice to hear your process and thinking through your rationales for responding to which pieces. So thank you for that. So we have another question about the data collection process, which is, how do you respond to unexpected challenges in your data collection process? I think that this past year is a great example for people, especially in the social sciences.
Yes. So this past year is a good example, and I'm going to be honest, I cried because I was like, oh no. But then I was like, hair back, gotta get it together. And I was like, so this is a perfect example because I wanted to do my interviews in person. And my dissertation is an interview study. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to do them on Zoom. And I just sort of made that decision and went with it. And I had looked up just different dissertations using our, like lib.umish, of people who had done interviews over the phone. And there's like this large collection of anthropologists who were like, we just call people and just do these interviews over the phone. And like, here are the ups and downs of doing interviews over the phone. And so I guess like a more succinct answer is just like naming that it's like, look, this what you gonna do? Like, this the reality. And I was like, I'm gonna cry, I'm gonna give myself a minute because I'm disappointed, it didn't work out like I wanted it to. And then I'm a problem solve, because what I will say is it is not like whatever you're dealing with is not the first time somebody has dealt with that. And I'm thankful for people who write, and this is why it's good to read dissertations, is I'm thankful for people who name that they're like, oh, I went through this hiccup and this is how I solved it. Because, for folks like me who come in after, I'm reading it and I'm saying, that's the same hiccup. I did that too. And I'm like, okay, you just call people on the phone, or, you didn't use a web service necessarily, you may have, I did. Actually, I do think I read one where a woman used Skype. She used Skype to talk to participants all over the United States and was talking about the ins and outs of that. So yeah, I could also say more about, sometimes participants don't respond. I've dealt with that where participants are like, I'm interested. And then you're like, hello, are you interested? And you feel like you're harassing them to some degree. But longitudinal work or work with people is difficult in that way because, people got schedules and my participants are working folks. So sometimes their jobs are like, oh, I don't know what you had planned at 5 today, but cross it out. And they're like, okay, sorry, not today. It's like rescheduling. But I would say, roll with the punches. That's how I have to do, after I cry over in the corner, and then I'm like, okay, but we got to go with it. It's going to get done. It's a lot of pep talking, I'll say. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I want to step back a little bit, right? So we jumped into your data collection, writing a dissertation, getting feedback, but just for our audience, can you talk a little bit about like, what's the difference between these things? What's a pre-oral defense?
Yeah.
What's writing a dissertation? What's a dissertation defense? Like, what's the order in which these happen, and kind of like a, general timeline of when these things happen. And then we'll go into some of the nitty gritty about your dissertation.
Yeah. So so at Michigan, we call it a proposal defense. And you write, it comes first. So you're going to do this proposal defense where you are, the way it was explained to me is you're putting out these ideas that you have. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be polished. It's just going to have to be something for them to your committee to chew over. And so I wrote like this 40-page document about, you know, the dissertation study I wanted to do. And then after that gets approved, so the way that the proposal defense went for me is I went to this meeting. I was invited to this meeting by my committee. They were like, come. It was kind of Godfather-esque, like coming to the office, you know. It was scheduled ahead of time. And yeah, I gave like a 15-minute presentation on what I had written. It was a succinct version of what I had written in my document that I submitted. They had about 2 weeks to read that document, and then we turned around and did the proposal defense. And after the proposal defense, I had to write a memo where essentially they were like, can you address all of the questions that we had? Like, how do you plan on doing those things? Mm-hmm. And then now, you know, I'm in the process of writing the dissertation. And then once there comes a time, so it's, to me, my understanding of it is that it's cyclical, and that it's like, I'm writing these chapters, I'm turning them in, feedback is going to be given. And then there will come a magical day where my advisor says, you good. And it's like, okay, yay, like we got it, box it together, ship it out. And, you know, my committee will have about anywhere between 4 to 6 weeks to read it. And then we will schedule a pre-oral defense, which is their first engagement with the whole dissertation, them saying, you know, oh, we love this. We want to know more about this. And so a pre-oral is much, to my understanding, much like the proposal defense, where it's like, come in here and tell us so far what you've done. And then we're going to get into, you know, what we want to see. But this time, instead of the memo, it is you actually going back and making those revisions, and then hopefully getting to a place where they say, okay, cool. And then, you know, you're scheduling that final defense. Mm-hmm. The defense is exciting because this is what I always tell my family when they're like, what is that? I'm like, well, first of all, they would never let me get to the defense if I could fail. We're not playing that game. So rest assured, it's like any drama that you're like, oh my gosh, am I going to fail? Are they mad? It's like, that's going to happen in the pre-oral where people are like, scratch that. I don't like that. But if you get to the defense, that is literally your victory lap, is my understanding, is that you are at this place now where they say, share your work with the public. It is your hurrah. And, you know, the public gets to engage with your work. The committee's going to ask some questions, because at this point, you have said everything that I'm going to put in this document, it's there. And so some defenses I've attended, you know, I have seen committee members asking, well, why didn't you do X, Y, and Z? Mm-hmm. And I've asked like the presenter afterwards, like, why did they ask you that? Like, obviously it's over. Like the thing is, you know, on its way to Rackham. And they're like, oh, they're still holding on to it. You know, it's like, it's still something that, it's still something they want to know about because I didn't do it. And so they're just putting it out there. Like, it's like, it's not to trip you up. It's just, you know, it's the end. So yeah. That's my understanding of those three things.
Okay. Well, you know, as a person who's been through the process, that's exactly the process.
Yeah, okay. That makes me feel better.
So the next question, so you talk about the fact that you're writing your dissertation now. So we want to know how you manage your time, your goals, and your well-being during the dissertation writing process. And the well-being part is really important. So don't forget to add that in there.
So writing goals
and well-being.
So I use like this calendar. So it's NCID. I think it's NCID. It's like the faculty. I forget. Okay, there's like a website for faculty. It's like this collective.
The National Institute for Faculty Diversity and Development.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You know, it takes a village, really, to remember all these acronyms. He was like, I look at the email daily, and I don't know. Okay. So they have a module. The video is free, and they teach you how to like make a calendar, like a semester plan, where they're like, pick your goals and your tasks and break them down into smaller chunks. That is how I manage my writing. I use that model. So I will say, oh, I need to write a methodology chapter. That is like a larger goal. And then I'll say, okay, well, what tasks need to go into achieving this goal? And then what I'll do is I'll assign those tasks to weeks. I'll say this week we're working on this task, which consists of all these sub-tasks, right? And so, yeah, I mean, that has worked for me because I'm somebody who I can't think big picture. I have to go really, really small. So, you know, my to-do list has something as simple as, you know, find a resource, find one citation for blah, blah, blah. Like that's how small we're talking, because I'm like, if I get nothing else done today, I found that one citation and then, you know, I'm feeling good. And that goes into my well-being because I am someone who, you know, I was raised to have a type A personality. And my mother even has a book called Raising Your Type A Child. No lie. No lie. It was wild because if you flip through it, you're like, this is my life. And that is frightening that she followed this book like to the T. So, so when I'm like walking away from a day and I'm like, I didn't get anything done, like I am destroyed and like my mental health it crashes. Like I'm like, and I'm a little bit maniacal in the way that I'm like, you can't watch TV. Like you can't watch TV because you didn't do this thing. And so so I'm working on that with my therapist. I can definitely say therapy is a way of maintaining well-being. But I will also say that I've adjusted what it means to be productive. I've adjusted what it means to be successful. So making these small tasks helps my well-being too, because if I walk away from my desk and I'm like, you did exactly what you're supposed to do today, which was find that one resource, you know, and it's like, that matters to me. So yeah, I will also say I have accountability groups. Y'all are included. And I think that's so dope that I'm like, my accountability group is like right here. Like, you know, I write with Laura Ann for 3 hours, 4 hours on Wednesdays. You know, Ebony got me together on my timeline last Friday, impromptu calls. So it's just like so many people come together to help. And that does also help with goals. And then I'll say well-being. It's a funny story. I went to college with a woman who used to say, if I'm not done with it by this time, I'm not done with it. It's over. Like I'm going to bed. I'm going to go do something else. Mm-hmm. She just had like this bracket where she would just cut it off. And so that is something else that I've done for my well-being, where I've just said, I'm working until 5. And if it's not done by 5, it's tomorrow's problem. And I go off and I do what I want to do. Mm-hmm. And that has been really helpful for me because in my first few years, I would just be at my desk until like 11, 12 at night. And I would be like, a zombie. And I was like, this never ends. It never ends. And then, you know, I remember what she said in school. And then I had a cohort mate who connected being a grad student to working in a factory, where he was like, I take my lunch pail in when the bell ring, and when the bell ring, I get my lunch pail and I go home. He was just like, I'm off the clock. And I was like, yeah, there's actually something to it. Like, I want to have a life. And so I chat with my friends. Before COVID, I was an avid exerciser. I would go to my Pure Barre classes and tuck my little heart out. And that just got to be not possible once COVID started. And then now I'm like, I go for walks. Like, that's my favorite thing to do. I'm like, yes, I get to go outside. I'm like so ready to go outside and like go for a walk and smell the leaves or some stuff. It's just like, I just get out there and do what I want. So yeah, you have to take care of yourself during this time, because it's like, what I have found is when I neglect myself, I can't show up and do the work. And so then I'm like, what is the point? Because the work is going to be there no matter what. And so it's like, well, what are you going to do about you? And so I'm like, okay, you know, I take long baths, love a good soak. I watch TikTok, you know, I mean, whatever it is. I say this all the time. I spoil myself. Whatever you want to do, girl, do it. I'm like, okay, like, you know, so spoil yourself during this process. You know, just be a yes man to yourself, for real.
I think that's important, because one thing that we've been talking about throughout many episodes is kind of like that. I think that thread is well-being, right?
Mhm.
So, you know, if you are looking for a job or you're choosing a job or you're working your dissertation or you're, you know what I'm saying, you're taking classes, whatever it is, like one constant is like being able to take care of yourself because you need to make it through the entire process successfully, you know? And if you're driving yourself into the ground, you will barely be able to scratch through that dissertation, which takes so much out of you. So yes, I totally agree. Like well-being is so, so important to this process. And celebrating the small victories is
Yeah.
so important. Like you found that one citation. What? We have a pizza tonight? Yeah.
Like I'm just like, oh look, I found it. And sometimes even when I don't find it, I'm like, you know what, treat yourself. Like you looked like
Exactly, for 3 hours. That was something. Okay. Thank you.
it's just literally like, and I will also say, don't compare yourself to anyone else. That is also very important for your well-being. You know, because you get into this place of being like, well, why is so-and-so doing this and I'm not doing this and they're far and I'm not far. And it's like, shh, don't do that. Don't do that. Run your own race. Run your own race because there's nothing there. Your path is your path. There's really nothing like your own stuff. I'm just trying to tell you. I mean, it took me a while to learn that. And once I finally was like, that's not your lane. Like, stay in your business. I've been having fun ever since. I'm like, this is it for me. Like, claps from my lane, but I am.
Yeah, that's super important because the thing is, it's like everybody's on this race or whatever you want to call it, whatever metaphor you want to use. And so you're constantly like looking to the right and looking to the left. But if you stay in your lane and you're just looking towards your finish line, they're not going to distract you. You know what I'm saying? We get distracted by where other people are. Oh, they're finishing in 4 years. Or, oh, they, you know what I'm saying? They did their dissertation. Or, oh my gosh, they have half their dissertation done because they did it in this, you know, through this other process. Or they were on somebody's research project and that's how come they got to get all that data. You know what I mean? Like exactly what you're saying. Your lane is your lane. And once you stay in your lane, don't look to the left, don't look to the right, just look towards the finish line. The better you will be mentally, I think, in this process. You're so right. You're so right.
Because all our experiences are going to culminate to where we need to be.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So talking about dissertations and finding one citation, I love that part. It's just like, I found one citation today. Okay. You know what I mean? But I want to know how you organize, how you remain organized, right? So you're finding citations, you are reading books, you are reading articles, you are writing different drafts of things, you're sending drafts off to your committee, you're getting drafts back, you're working on a particular draft. How do you, and then you're collecting data, right? So how are you organizing like your data, your citations, your workspace, your calendar, so that you can keep track and if things don't get overwhelming, or that you lose track of just like your data or your drafts or whatever you're working on?
Hello, meet my planner. I had to take
the
it.
planner is huge.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And, wait a minute, because I was like, that's the crazy thing. I have two because I have a home one because people, you know, I have a spouse who wants to be like, oh, like I'm doing this today, and I'm like, I can't write that in my school planner. I just can't. Like that has nothing to do with school. So I had to get a home planner to be like, okay, you know, we're supposed to be doing this, we're supposed to be doing that. But when it comes to data, like so Michigan has like so many free platforms like Dropbox, Inbox, Google. And so I take advantage of every single one. And so I store all my data in Inbox and this is how I wish I did. I wish I kept like this Excel spreadsheet of like, this is where everything is, but I don't. I'm pretty much like a soccer mom at this point about myself where I'm just like, you go here on Tuesdays, you go there. Like, I just have this mental map in my head about like, all of my data is here. All analytic memos are in this folder. I separate by interviews, analytic memos, overall memos of just my dissertation that have nothing to do with the data. I mean, I memo everything. So literally if I'm like, I read Judith Butler today and I don't know what she's talking about, there's a memo in this folder about how I'm arguing with Judith Butler. Common. We be going at it all the time. So like Yeah, so like I use platforms like that to sort data. And then when you think about where do you put all this feedback? I admit I am not the best at that because I literally am just like, it's in my downloads folder. And I just go get it from my downloads folder. I'm trying to be better, but honestly, that chaos actually speaks to me. So I roll with it. And I would also say, but when, like, I'll go back to this. When it comes to participant data, because it's so like protected and sacred and secure, I have my act together on that. Like, so yes, inbox is like encrypted. Everything is neatly in a folder, sorted by like what its intention is. But when it comes like to my own stuff, I'm kind of like, Apple, Siri, tell me where this thing is. Like, like I say, it's best suited in my downloads folder. It's best suited in the email I found it in. You know what I mean? Because I'm not, I said I was type A and now look at me shooting myself in the foot. I'm like, what's that do about a folder? Like, I'm just like, I don't care, girl. I don't care. Where is it? If I can find it, that's there. Yeah, so I don't know if I like fully answered the question, but I guess the short answer is when it comes to my data, I'm tight with it. When it comes to everything else, it's like going to your Grammy's house. You like, there's a lot of stuff up in here, but she somehow knows where everything is. That's me and my relationship to my laptop.
And I think that's important, right? So folks kind of get overwhelmed with all the things that they have to do. And it's just kind of like, oh, well, I have to organize this. I have to put this here. I have to put this there. But depending on your personality and how you're able to, say your work style, like the way you work, then you find the thing that works for you, right? So if for you, it's like, I actually know where everything is on my laptop. Like I don't have to have everything in these label folders, besides my data, then that's your style. That's what you do. You know what I'm saying? So it's okay to not use other people's methods to keep yourself organized. You know what I'm saying? If there's a way that you in your mind, you have a file cabinet. See, for me, my file cabinet got cobwebs, you know what I'm saying? I got mommy brain up in it. Just too much happening. So I have to have a folder for everything, right? But
Yeah.
that's not necessarily everybody's steez, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I would also say my planner, so I'm like mapping out work. I don't know if you all can see this.
Mm-hmm.
So I keep it like I will write like headers across. So this is the teacher edition of the Happy Planner. Go ahead, shameless plug. So I will like write like what is like the category. So I was applying for the Ford Fellowship, so I was writing everything in these categories like that. Like this is what you need to do for the Ford. This is what you need to do for your disc proposal. This is what you need to do for this writing project you're on. And like that's how I like keep my task organized for sure. Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, I agree with you. Like it's if you see people, because there are a lot of like really hyper organized folks in grad school, and it's gonna kind of almost like call you in where you feel like, oh my gosh, like I need to get that, and then you stop and realize like that's actually not how I best flow. Like I really enjoy kind of being like, oh look, there that is. Like, we don't all have to be like, because that can be overwhelming. I think it's trying to find an organization system when you really already have one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
totally. All right, so thank you so much. Did you want to add something? I didn't mean to cut you. I was gonna.
Yeah, I was also gonna say, Ashley. Okay. Professional voice. I was also gonna say, Ashley, you did mention like that there are just tools and resources that are available either for free or through institutions, and people can figure out like which of those platforms might work best for them, or a paper planner. And I was thinking about you saying like, stay in your lane, don't look to the left, don't look to the right. You might see somebody on your right who's using, I know a lot of people use Zotero. I've tried to use Zotero. I know people try to use EndNote. I do not like EndNote personally. I know people who are, it is the end all be all. It is the thing that has saved me in grad school. I used that thing for a little while and I was like, I do not like this. Yeah. Maybe I should not include my dislike of EndNote in our final video cut, but things that work for one person might not work for another person. Like I like the Google system. I like the Google Drive system. I've got friends who use the Dropbox system and they just swear by everything they do, all their communication with their committee. Yeah, not for me, right? And the thing, the things that work for me don't work for others. So some of it is just like learning about all the different platforms that are out there and finding one that really suits your style and your needs. So I hear that in there.
Yeah. I do use a tarot. I don't swear by it because I kind of don't know if I'm using it right. And that's another thing. Don't be scared to be like, am I doing this correctly? Like, just do it how you want to do it. Because sometimes I look at other folks, the tarot, and I'm like, huh, I am not maximizing its capabilities.
Oh my God.
Okay. Let's continue.
Yeah. So sorry. Okay. So we've talked actually about a few different things like writing. We've talked a lot about, and I'm going to talk about the defense, the actual defense, the meeting, the verbal feedback in person. So my question for you there is, how do you prepare for that meeting? Right? You said it's kind of like the Godfather. Come on in, come in the door. How do you prepare for that? Maybe practically, like in terms of like defending your work, and how do you prepare emotionally, and how do you care for yourself in the moments that are leading up to this high stakes meeting, high anxiety meeting? For me personally, I guess that's me saying, yeah. So
there's like the actual preparation of being like, I'm making this PowerPoint, and having to make this presentation and possibly practice this presentation. But then in the sense of caring for myself, I had to tell myself, like, it's over, like it's all said and done. Like this is the arrival point, like relax. And so, because I was still like trying to add stuff, I was still like, oh, but what about this? And it was like, it's like, whatever is there is there. And so in terms of preparing and caring for myself, after I made that PowerPoint, I relaxed. I was like, I'm not even looking at the document because, and I really feel like one of you told me this, not gonna lie. Like, I feel like one of you were like basically like, go to bed. Like, what do you, like, whatever you are afraid of, you are ready to do it. Like, you have everything you need to do it. So that helped me, I know, because I was like, what if they ask me this? And what if they ask me that? And oh my gosh, I gotta like it was literally like interview prep. Like, I was like, I'm a politician, like I gotta say the right thing. And it was like, no, sis, like you already know how to say the right thing. You already know what to say. It's your work. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, like, I mean, also what I would say too is at either point, whether it be proposal or dissertation, just the sigh of relief, because it's like, you've already done the hard work. Like the defense, pre-oral, proposal, you've already done the hard stuff. You wrote this really hard, like big, huge document that had so much at stake. And now you're at a part where it's like, it's my turn now. Like, I get to almost like showcase it. And so my first advisor, Leah told me, she said, you may have to edit this out because I don't know if she wants me to say it, but she said, everybody in that room is there for you. And so she said, at the end of the day, don't be scared to just own it. Like, it's like it's almost like you're going in like this exec board member where you're like, here's the thing, it's like, what are we going to do? Because I was going into my proposal defense, like, whatever they tell me, I'm going to do it. Cause like, I'm new and I don't know what I'm doing. And oh my God, like, cause I had such a whiplash, right, for writing it. And I can imagine writing a dissertation feels the same way. You're like, I'm tired. I'm exhausted. Whatever you need, just tell me so I can go back to my room and write it. And she was like, no, don't do that. Like, absolutely not. Like, it's yours. And I was like, okay. And one of the things that she said that stuck with me was, she was like, make them work for it. And I was like, what? And she was like, anybody who wants to tear something up that you've spent so much time on, you make them work for it. Don't let them have at it so easy. Mm-hmm. And that worked for me, because I went into the room and I was like, like shoulders relaxed, like, what you got to say? Like, not defensive, but just kind of like, come on, like, let's talk about it. And at the end of it, I was like, oh, because, as a Black person, woman, I was too aggressive. I was like, oh gosh, like they're going to fail me just to check me, just to put me in my place. And my advisor came back and was like, you did so well. She was like, that's great. She was like, you were so confident. She was like, she was like, it was just so good to see, like, you take ownership of your work. And so I'll say that, take ownership, don't be scared, like, to just know, like, I did this, I've already done the hard stuff. And I'm going to repeat what Leah said, because I think we as women often don't want to take this stance because we're like, that's not modest, that's not nice, that's not polite. But when she was like, oh no, if you want to tear something up, you got to work for it. And so that helped me relax too. I promise this is all related. Sometimes I feel like I'm just like,
I love it.
Like, did I answer? Yes, I did. But, but I'm just like, when she told me that, because we had talked the night before, I was like, that's true. I was like, I really worked my tail off for months. And this idea of like people dismantling something in minutes is just nuts. And so it's like, no, and by that, and so I'll elaborate. By that, it's like, don't be afraid to say, well, what do you mean by that? Or can you give me an example? Or, I'm wondering how I could, keep what I have and still address what you want. Like, because there's something about honoring, like, I didn't go about this loosey-goosey, willy-nilly. Like, I actually did this, it's like, this had a lot of info in it. Yeah, so I'm just like, be at peace, knowing that it's like, put your Beyonce on. I'm not gonna mention Oprah because everybody don't like Oprah. Put your Beyonce on.
You gotta cut this up. You know what I'm saying? Oprah might be mad. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I gotta cut it out because then we'll never be on Oprah.
When I become somebody, I'll be upset.
Think Beyonce. I don't know if I can cuss, but when she told us this my shit, bow down. Like, you have to care about you. Where it's like, you didn't write this, I wrote this. This is mine. Be cocky with it. And, and sometimes that's okay too. It's okay to be like, who out here just writing 200 plus pages for fun? Come on now, have some confidence about yourself. And, it's okay to be like, oh, thank you for that critique. But we ain't got to roll over. And I think, sorry, I'm getting on my Nikki Giovanni ego tripping energy. So. I'm like, I don't know. That is something that does need to be named. We think we need to concede. Yeah. And it's just not true because, and I think for me, that's what a lot of my anxiety the day before one of these defenses was I was like, I just am not ready for the filet I'm about to get. And it was like, there was no such filet. Everybody was very kind. Everybody was very nice. And it also helped that I was like, you can't have your way. Like, hold on, Rest, relax, relate, release. And no, you did what you needed to do. Yes.
So for our final question, we wanted to know what you found the most challenging about the dissertating process and what's the most rewarding. Ooh, sigh. Ooh, that was,
I'm sorry, because I'm in a season where all of it feels extremely challenging and I'm like, what a reward at? Like, I'm going to be honest. But what I will say is that what's challenging is, it's because it's such a long process, right? Is that you're like, when will I get to the end? And it's like, the end is near, it's like, calm down, it's okay. And it's like, it's never ending. It's just sludging and I'm tired and my legs hurt and my brain is hurting. And it's like, it's okay. But it's like, you feel all of that. You have to feel all of that because you need to acknowledge it so that you can go, we talked about well-being. You need to acknowledge that so you can take care of yourself in actual, like, honest ways. But but the rewarding part is, I would say for me so far, is like my participants. Like when they are like, this is so dope. Like, I love that you're doing this. I'm like, okay. Like I have the streak to go on like tomorrow. Like, or like when, I am sitting at my desk and I find my one citation and I'm like, this person said this like 20 years ago. Like when I was first coming into grad school and I said something that I thought was so unique and then I read that someone said it 20 years ago, I would have like this existential crisis, like,
I'm not original.
Exactly. And then now you're like, I knew it. I told you. Citation, citation, citation. That's super rewarding when like you kind of like are starting to put all of this together and you're like, I knew this was a thing and like it's coming through and it is a thing. Or like, those are two rewards. Like when my participants are like, thank you, like I'm glad you're doing this and I'm so happy to be a part of this. And I'm like, yes. And we're like, when I have like a writing breakthrough and I'm like, oh my God, it's all coming together and it's gonna be so dope. And then to just the reward of knowing that like you're creating new knowledge, like even if you're like, it's not exactly original, it's like, it's new because it's mine and I wasn't here before. So it's like, that's rewarding too, to be like, I am now in like this really long tradition of knowledge creation, which is like 1/10 of a second of a feeling. Cause then you're like, ew, gross. That's so like, okay, full of yourself. Like, don't do that. But then it's like, no, like I am, Can you all tell that like I teeter between like, get a grip and like, no, I'm losing it. Like I'm having a good time.
I feel for you, Ashley.
Y'all are friends, so I'm just like telling you.
I identify.
And then later, like, delete that. Don't let people know. It's a mystery. Right? Yeah. So.
Well, thank you, Ashley. This was so much fun. And I'm so glad that you shared your experience with us going through the dissertation process, because I know it's, it's different for everyone. And it's good to hear people's voice in terms of like how they got through it, how they're going through it, what's going on now. And understanding that this process does have its challenges, but also has its rewards. And we need to acknowledge that. And like you said, the challenges that we have to be really real about those challenges so that we can be honest about what we need to do to keep and maintain our well-being. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah.
I love you both, like insanely. And I'm just like, my cheeks hurt. I've just been smiling this whole time. I hope that's prevalent in the video, that this is how their spirits affect me, that I'm just like, people are going to be like, rest your face. I can't. I like him.
Thank you for joining us for We Need to Name This, a series where we unpack the hidden curriculum of academe. Join us for our next episode, Publishing My First Paper, with Doctors Natalie Davis and Alina Neal Jackson. For more information, visit www.weneedtonamethis.com.